So welcome to this lecture series on environment and ecology presented by Mentors for IAS in association with Bangalore IAS Academy and Namak KPSC. So in this particular video, we will briefly discuss about the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change as well as Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now this particular session is nothing but an introduction to this and not a thorough cover of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change or nor the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So what I want you to do is that after this particular session, if whatever things that you do not understand, I want you to read through it. Until and unless you do your homework, until and unless you go through it, this particular topic will not be covered. On top of it, before going and writing your examination, before taking up your examination, it is actually important that you cover your current affairs when it comes to all these international organizations. However, I will not be covering all the international organizations. I will only be briefly mentioning the important aspects of UNFCCC as well as IPCC. So let us first start with UNFCCC. Now, the UNFCCC stands for United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. UNFCCC. Okay. Now, initially, we used to have the United Nations Summit Conference on Environment and Development, known as UNCED, So when the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development was held in Rio de Janeiro in June 1992, in this particular conference, it was actually adopted by consensus the first multilateral legal instrument on climate change, which is today known as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Meaning, back in 1992, countries joined the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change to cooperatively consider what they could do to limit average global temperature increases and the resulting climate change and to cope with whatever impacts were inevitable. As of today, there are around 195 parties to the convention. The UNFCCC Secretariat supports all institutions involved in the international climate change negotiations, particularly the Conference of Parties, which is known as COP. Now, this is an important aspect of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is known as Conference of Parties. I want you to read more about what COP is. Okay, so all of the negotiations, particularly about the COP, is taken care of by the Secretariat of the UNFCCC, the subsidiary bodies which advise the COP, and the COP Bureau, which deals mainly with procedural and organizational issues arising from the COP and also the technical functions. Also, all subsequent multilateral negotiations on different aspects of climate change, including both adaptation and mitigation, are being held based on the principles and objectives set out by the UNFCCC. So this was nothing but a brief introduction to what UNFCCC is. So after that, what has happened is that every year something known as the Conference of Parties takes place. Okay, this is nothing but under the aegis of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So it is actually important that we briefly go through all the Conference of Parties. However, due to time constraint, I will not be going through all the Conference of Parties. Rather, I will only be going through 3 Conference of Parties, that is the 3rd Conference of Parties, then the 19th Conference of Parties as well as the 21st Conference of Parties. So I will only be going through these 3 Conference of Parties because of the importance associated with these 3 Conference of Parties. So the first is obviously your 3rd Conference of Parties. Okay, so first I will be discussing about what happened in the third conference of parties. Now, the reason I'm actually going to talk about the third COP is that it is under this, or it is because of this conference of parties, that today we have something known as the Kyoto Protocol, which everybody is aware of, which everybody would have heard of. So this discussion is nothing but about the Kyoto Protocol. So what happened was that by 1995, countries realized that emission reduction provisions in the convention were actually inadequate. Therefore, they launched negotiations to strengthen the global response to climate change, and 2 years later adopted the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol was adopted in Kyoto, Japan on 11 December 1997, and hence it is known as Kyoto Protocol, based on the region in Japan where this particular protocol was adopted. Due to the complex ratification process, it was actually entered into force later on 16th February 2005. So in short, the Kyoto Protocol is what operationalizes the United Nations Framework Convention on climate change. It commits industrialized countries to stabilize greenhouse gas emissions based on the principles of the convention. So the major distinction between the protocol and the convention itself is that while the convention encouraged industrialized countries to stabilize greenhouse gas emissions, the protocol actually commits them to do so. So what is this Kyoto Protocol all about? The Kyoto Protocol is all about trying to reduce and cap the global emissions of greenhouse gases in order to prevent global warming, which is resulting in this climate change about which we have been discussing all this while. So coming to this Kyoto Protocol, what are the targets? Okay, or if you discuss about the targets of the Kyoto Protocol. Okay, so this Kyoto Protocol actually sets binding emission reduction targets for 37 industrialized countries and the European Community in its first commitment period. It only binds the developed countries because it recognizes that they are largely responsible for the current high levels of greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere, which are the result of more than 150 years of industrial activity. Hence, Kyoto Protocol places a heavier burden on developed nations under its central principle, common but differentiated responsibility. What do you mean by common but differentiated responsibility? See, all nations have the responsibility to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases. However, the developed countries have a greater responsibility. Why? Because it is the developed countries who industrialized first, and they are responsible for majority of the emissions of greenhouse gases which are present in the atmosphere today, and therefore they are responsible for most of the global warming or climate change, and hence they should be more responsible when it comes to combating climate change. The other least developed countries or developing countries are yet to develop, and they are yet to reap in the benefits of economic development or industrialization. Therefore, they should not be stopped from developing or from development, and they should be given some leeway when it comes to development. And the developed countries who have already reaped in the benefits of industrialization should play a greater role. Therefore, the developed countries have greater responsibility when it comes to capping greenhouse gases, more than the developing or the undeveloped nations. So overall, these targets add up to an average of 5% emission reduction compared to 1990 levels over the 5-year period, that is 2008 to 2012. So now discussing about the architecture of the Kyoto Protocol itself. So if you want to discuss about the architecture of the Kyoto Protocol, we can say that there are two important formations within this Kyoto Protocol. So the Kyoto Protocol actually consists of the emission reduction commitments and the flexible market mechanisms. So in order to understand what is this Kyoto Protocol, I want you to understand what are these emission reduction commitments and flexible market mechanisms. However, before this, I also want you to read or go through how do you classify nations under Kyoto Protocol? There are different annexures. Okay, so different nations come under different annexures or annex under the Kyoto Protocol. This I want you to do it by yourself. So only when you go through this will you have a better understanding of what Kyoto Protocol is. So this is a part of your homework if you're actually going through this video. So what is this emissions reductions commitment? Okay, so the first this emission reductions commitments was nothing but the first binding emissions reduction commitments for developed countries who are parties to this particular protocol. So greenhouse gas emissions, most prevalently carbon dioxide, became a new commodity, and Kyoto Protocol now began to internalize what was now recognized as an unpriced externality. Okay, so there was now a kind of a pressure on developed nations to reduce their emissions. That is nothing but your emission reduction commitments. Next is your flexible market mechanism. Okay, so based on this reduced emission, where now carbon is treated to be a commodity where they have to reduce its emission. Okay, so now if you understand that, we now move over to the flexible market mechanisms. So the flexible market mechanism of the Kyoto Protocol is based on the trade of emissions permits. Kyoto Protocol countries bound to targets have to meet them largely through domestic action, that is to reduce their emissions onshore. But they can meet part of their targets through three market-based mechanisms that ideally encourage greenhouse gas abatement to start where it is most effective. For example, in the developing world. Quite simply, it does not matter where emissions are reduced as long as they are removed from the planet's atmosphere. So what I'm trying to say is that, say for example, there are two countries A and B. There are two countries A and B. Okay. So out of these two countries A and B, say for example, there are commitments on A and B to reduce carbon dioxide. Okay. So A is allowed to release, just for the sake of example, okay, A is allowed to reduce 50 tons of carbon dioxide, for example, into the atmosphere. So this has to be measured. So there are obviously calculations because we will consider most of the point sources rather than all these numerous sources. B, on the other hand, is also allowed to emit only 50 tons of carbon dioxide. It is not allowed to emit more than 50 tons of carbon dioxide. So I'm saying this is just for the sake of explanation. This is nothing but an example that I'm going so that it is somewhat understandable to you. So what I'm trying to say is that, say for example, A has already emitted, in 1 year it is only allowed to emit 50 tons of carbon dioxide. Now in that particular year, say for example by October end, it has already emitted more than 50 tons of carbon dioxide. So it cannot go for another 2 months, that is November and December, without any economic activity. So obviously it will emit carbon dioxide, but it has already crossed its limit. But when it comes to country B was more successful in capping the emission of carbon dioxide and has only emitted, say for example, 25 tons of carbon dioxide. So it still has 25 tons of carbon dioxide that can be emitted. So what will happen is that country B will purchase this ability to emit 25 tons of carbon dioxide from B. So B saying that fine, I can go without emitting carbon dioxide for another 2 months. So B will sell this ability to emit 25 tons of carbon dioxide to country B, okay, for some amount of money. So this amount of money B can use for investing in greener sources of energy, such as renewable sources of energy. This is a very simple example that I am giving so that you are able to understand. This is what you mean by emission reduction commitments and flexible market mechanisms. So you will have a better understanding as I continue to explain what is going to happen. Okay, so under this Kyoto Protocol's flexible market mechanisms, you have joint implementation, the clean development mechanism, and the emission trading. So what happens here? First is your joint implementation. The mechanism known as joint implementation allows a country with an emission reduction or limitation commitment under the Kyoto Protocol, that is your Annex B party developed country, Annex B countries. I hope you've already gone through the different annexures by now. Annex B party, nothing but your developed countries, to earn emission reduction units from an emission reduction or emission removal project in another Annex B party. So whatever that I've mentioned over here, it is nothing but buying of these things, this carbon credits from different countries. This what you call as that is from an emission reduction or emission removal project in another country, that is Annex B party, each equivalent to 1 ton of carbon dioxide, which can be counted towards meeting its Kyoto target. So the joint implementation offers parties a flexible and cost efficient means of fulfilling a part of their Kyoto commitments, while the host party benefits from foreign investment and technology transfer. So as I told you, A can continue with its economic activity, at the same time B benefits from investment. The other way you can go about is that instead of buying these carbon credits, A can also invest in green projects in B or in developing countries. Okay, A can invest in green projects in developing nations and in turn can also purchase carbon credits, because as I mentioned earlier, it does not matter where emissions are reduced as long as the emissions are reduced at some part of the world somehow. So this is what joint implementation means. Next, coming to the clean development mechanism. The clean development mechanism allows a country with an emission reduction or emission limitation commitment under the Kyoto Protocol, that is your Annex B party, to implement an emission reduction project in developing countries. So it is the first global environmental investment and credit scheme of its kind, providing standardized emissions offset instruments. Such projects can earn sellable certified emission reduction credits, each equivalent to 1 ton of carbon dioxide, which can be counted towards meeting Kyoto targets. This is your clean development mechanism. Then in order to explain this, take an example. For example, as I mentioned earlier, similar to that, a rural electrification project using solar panels or the installation of more energy efficient boilers. This is an example I am saying. Take the example of a clean development mechanism project such as rural electrification projects using solar panels or the installation of more energy efficient boilers. So the mechanism stimulates sustainable development and emission reductions while giving industrialized countries some flexibility in how they meet their emission reduction or limitation targets. Meaning what? If country A is exceeding its limit, instead of buying these carbon extra emitting ability from country B, rather it can invest in greener projects like rural electrification using solar panels in some developing country, so that it is reducing emissions in that developing country, and in turn country A can further emit more carbon dioxide. So most of these, what the example which I gave you, most of these CDM or clean development mechanism projects were implemented in China and India, as the climate in these countries are favorable for implementing projects for almost all the spheres such as agriculture, waste handling and disposal, afforestation and reforestation. So such CDM projects are also to be supported by the approval of Annex B countries, those which have qualified obligations according to the Kyoto Protocol. Next, before moving over to the next conference of parties, let me just briefly explain what is carbon trading. Okay, so under carbon trading, there is emission trading and offset trading. Under carbon trading, there is emission trading and offset trading. So first, what is this carbon trading? Now, carbon trading is the name given to the exchange of emission permits. This exchange may take place within the economy or may take the form of international transactions. So the carbon trading can take place through emission trading or offset trading. So first is emission trading. Now see, emission trading is nothing but cap and trade. Emission permit is known alternatively as carbon trading. So what happens here is that for each Annex 1 country, the protocol has assigned a fixed amount of carbon emission in the agreement. This amount is actually the amount of emission which is to be reduced by the concerned country. On the other hand, it implies that the country was permitted to emit the remaining amount, and this emission allowance is actually one kind of carbon credit. So the total amount of allowance is then subdivided into certain units. The units are expressed in terms of carbon equivalent, and each unit gives the owner the right to emit 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide or other equivalent greenhouse gases. This is nothing but your emission trading. Next is your offset trading. Now, offset trading is also known as your carbon project or baseline and credit trading. So what happens here is that this is nothing but another variant of carbon credit which is to be earned by a country by investing some amount of money in such projects known as carbon projects, which will emit lesser amount of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. For example, suppose a thermal plant of 800 megawatt capacity emits 400 carbon equivalent in the atmosphere. Now a country builds up a 800 megawatt wind energy plant which does not generate any amount of emission as an alternative of the thermal plant. Then by investing in this project, the country will have earned 400 carbon equivalent. So with this example, I hope it is a bit clear as to what is this Kyoto Protocol. But again, as I had mentioned initially itself, if it is not clear to you, it is important that you read through it more. Okay. However, before moving over to the next topic, I just wanted to mention what happens when it comes to non-compliance of the Kyoto Protocol. So, see, if a country does not meet the requirements for measurements and reporting, the said country loses the privilege of gaining credit through joint implementation projects. Meaning, if a country goes above its emissions cap and does not try to make up the difference through any of the mechanisms available, then the said country must make up for the difference plus an additional 30% during the next period. The country could also be banned from participating in the cap and trade program if it continues to violate the Kyoto Protocol. So I hope you have had some fair understanding as to what is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and what is the Kyoto Protocol. So next we will discuss briefly about the 19th Conference of Parties which took place in 2013. The reason it is actually important is because nationally determined contributions was put forward in a clear and transparent manner in this particular Conference of Parties. On top of that, governments actually, on top of this, apart from the nationally determined contributions, in this particular Conference of Parties, the governments resolved to strengthen measures to close the ambition gap. What is the ambition gap? The ambition gap is nothing but the gap between what has been pledged to date and what is required to keep the world below a maximum average of 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise. This is nothing but your ambition gap. What is the ambition gap? The gap between what has been pledged and what is required to keep the world below a maximum average of 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise before the new agreement enters into force in 2020. Apart from this, in this particular Conference of Parties, there was also a mobilization for 100 billion US dollars. There is also an effort to mobilize 100 billion US dollars annually by the year 2020 to support developing countries in their climate change actions, where the developed countries agreed to make their efforts on a biennial basis from 2014 onwards to 2020. And it is in this Conference of Parties that the Green Climate Fund was thus properly established. Even though there were proposals or talk about the Green Climate Fund, it was at this particular Conference of Parties that the Green Climate Fund was established properly. Apart from this, the governments also agreed on a set of decisions on ways to reduce emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. So there's something known as REDD plus, REDD plus, REDD plus. So I want you to read about this REDD plus, a question on which, a concept about which a question was already asked in your UPSC examination. So this is nothing but reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. That is what REDD actually stands for. So this is nothing but a brief cap of the 19th Conference of Parties. Next is your famous 21st Conference of Parties in the year 2015, known as the Paris Climate Change Conference, known as your Paris Climate Change Conference. Okay. Now, what were the objectives of the Paris Agreement, which actually culminated the Conference of Parties? The 21st Conference of Parties actually culminated with the Paris Agreement, which everybody is aware of. So I will not discuss too many things apart from this. So let me just explain what are the objectives of the Paris Agreement. So the objectives of the Paris Agreement were to hold the increase in global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, recognizing that this would significantly reduce the risks and impacts of climate change. So the agreement also talks about reaching the global peaking of emissions by the second half of the century, recognizing that peaking will take longer for developing countries. Apart from this, the other important thing that I wanted to mention about the 21st Conference of Parties is the nationally determined contributions, or NDC, nationally determined contributions. So the Paris Agreement required all parties to put forward their best efforts through nationally determined contributions and to strengthen these efforts in the years ahead. This includes requirements that all parties report regularly on their emissions and on their implementation efforts. So in 2018, parties will take stock of the collective efforts in relation to progress towards the goal set in the Paris Agreement and to inform the preparation of the nationally determined contributions. So what will happen is that there will be a global stock take, meaning every 5 years there will be an assessment, a collective assessment of the progress made towards achieving the purpose of the agreement and to inform further individual actions by the parties. So this is nothing but your brief about the important things that took place in the 21st Conference of Parties that was in Paris. The famous Paris Climate Change Agreement also was nothing but your part of your 21st Conference of Parties. Okay. Next, just a brief about the intergovernmental panel on climate change. The IPCC stands for what? IPCC stands for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now, the UN General Assembly in the year 1988 actually adopted a resolution for the setting up of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So what I wanted to tell you is that this particular panel on climate change, that is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, was established by the UNEP, that is by the United Nations Environment Programme, and the World Meteorological Organization, that is your WMO, in 1988, to provide the governments of the world with a clear scientific view of what is happening to the world's climate. So the Secretariat of the IPCC coordinates all the IPCC work and liaises with the governments. The Secretariat is supported by the World Meteorological Organizations and the United Nations Environment program and is hosted at the World Meteorological Organization headquarters in Geneva. So this particular panel is open to all members of the United Nations and the World Meteorological Organizations, and also currently has about 195 countries as members of the IPCC. So what is the basic objective? What are the tasks of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change? See, the initial task of the IPCC was outlined in the United Nations General Assembly resolution to prepare a comprehensive review and recommendations with respect to the state of knowledge on the science of climate change, social and economic impact of climate change, and possible response strategies and elements for inclusion in a possible future international convention on climate change. Meaning what? This is nothing but to collect data about climate change which can be used in conventions which were to be established or which may be set up in the future. So this IPCC is nothing but a scientific body. This scientific body will review and assess the most recent scientific, technical and socio-economic information produced worldwide relevant to the understanding of climate change. However, here it is important to note that IPCC does not conduct any research, nor does it monitor climate related data or parameters. What does it do? It will only review and assess the most recent scientific and technical information regarding climate change, but it will not conduct its own research. So what happens is thousands of scientists from all over the world will contribute to the work of the IPCC on a voluntary basis, and review is nothing but an essential part of the IPCC process to ensure an objective and complete assessment of current information. So all the other nations, by endorsing the IPCC reports, governments acknowledge the authority of their scientific content, and the work of the organization is therefore policy relevant and yet policy neutral, but never policy prescriptive. Meaning IPCC will never tell the governments what to do. The governments of the world can make use of the information presented by the IPCC to take relevant decisions and informations. So this is nothing but what the IPCC does. So an important aspect or with respect to IPCC is something known as the assessment reports. Is your assessment reports. Okay. So what is this assessment reports, or what are these assessment reports? See, in accordance with its mandate and as reaffirmed in various decisions by the panel, the IPCC prepares at regular intervals a comprehensive assessment report of scientific, technical and socio-economic information relevant for the understanding of human-induced climate change, potential impacts of climate change and options for mitigation and adaptation. So these assessment reports are normally published in several volumes, one for each of the working groups of the IPCC and subject to the decision by the panel. So since these are nothing but assessment reports to be used by major governments across the world, they are always written in a non-technical style which is suitable for policy makers, and so that it is easier for policy makers to understand what this assessment report actually talks about. So this was nothing but a brief overview or nothing but to cap the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Kyoto Protocol, the Conference of Parties and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now this was nothing but kind of more of a revision. So I would actually say that first read about this, whatever material that you're using, or just by googling it, just Google UNFCCC, Kyoto Protocol and IPCC, and only then you may go to this particular video, or else I feel that it will be a bit difficult for you to understand and comprehend what is actually happening over here. So however, it is important that you brush up, that you also prepare along with your current affairs so that this particular topic is thorough and you are able to cover up in a comprehensive manner. So I hope you've had some understanding about the UNFCCC Kyoto Protocol and the IPCC. If you do have any doubts, please do write to us in the comment section. Thank you for watching. For more such videos, please do follow and subscribe to us. Thank you.